And we're back with another edition of the Go Azure Meetup, right to you from YouTube. And
Welcome back,
with me,
everybody.
yeah, and with me is Misha again. So let's recap what we did in the last couple of weeks when we were not live. I've been at the MVP Summit in Seattle with a lot of other MVPs. Heard a lot about new tech that's coming up. Unfortunately, can't share a lot about it yet, but I did talk with a few other MVPs about being on this meetup. So I might have other sessions in the works for the coming months. So that's really nice. So just click on the bell icon on this channel and make sure that you follow us. So, Misha, what did you do in the past couple of weeks?
Yeah, definitely click that bell icon. Um, I have been working at my client with implementing CADA, Kubernetes Event-Driven Autoscaling, that went GA fairly recently, and it has been quite a good success. We have been managing to autoscale applications in our dev clusters, and soon going to bring that to production. So that was a really cool experience. And it's awesome to see that actually working and providing value to the organization. So keep it up, Microsoft.
Nice. All right. So with us today, we have Mishka from Finland. I really hope I pronounced his name right. He's an M365 MVP because we wanted to talk about the Copilot train, right? Everybody here hears about Copilot. Everybody talks about Copilot. So I wanted to make sure that we had that we have a session where we zoom in on what Copilot can do, how we can extend it, why you would want to do that, how it can help us, and whatever. So I'm gonna call Nisha in.
Hello.
Here he is. Hello. Um, and we will just hop out. We will let you do everything that you want to do. Also
Yeah.
gonna include your slides. And
There we
the
go.
floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Misha. Hi, everyone. It's not the usual thing that you expect to see in an Azure meetup. The first things about M365 and Copilot and all of that. But I promise I'll try to keep it technical today. I know that's what people here like. So we're going to be talking about Copilot for Microsoft 365 and especially the extensions part. That's something that people are really talking about now. How do we extend Copilot and why should you actually even do that in the first place? Or should you in some cases? So to start a bit about who I am, hi everyone, I'm Miska Kytö. I'm from Finland. So if you see any weird letters in my name or hear a very elvish sounding language at some point, it's Finnish. I'm a consultant and trainer at Tulava. I split my time nowadays pretty 50-50 between consulting with clients and then training. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer and lately been running a whole lot of trainings around Copilot. I'm also a Microsoft MVP in two categories, so M365 and under that more specifically Teams, and then mixed reality development, so a two-category MVP. And I've tried to list some things that I really enjoy, but usually when someone asks me, okay, what do I specialize in? I'll just answer, well, Microsoft. That's my specification. That's all that I'm interested in. My technical background is in cybersecurity, and I still do a cybersecurity consultation, working with security operations and Microsoft Defender. But also, I work a lot with modern work and M365. So think Teams, and now with as the biggest one, well, Copilot and AI in general. That's mostly what I've been doing for around 6 months now, a bit over that. Because it's an Azure meetup, I gotta say, I'm a technical guy. So yes, I do some work in Azure as well. So don't worry, I understand that world. But in general, what I always like to say is that what I enjoy the most is just making cool things. I'm not a developer, but I still like to code sometimes, be it low code or be it pro code, especially with these Copilot extensions, you get to do both, which is awesome. And I also, like I said, dabble in Azure and stuff like that. So no matter the technology, I just like to make cool things and make those cool things work. So enough about me and my background. Also, one thing about me that I always like to say is that I'm a pretty young guy, as you probably can see, but I'll make everyone feel very old very quickly by just saying that when I got my first computer, it ran Windows 8. So there you go. Thank you. But to start off with our agenda, so today we're gonna go through the basics of, okay, what are extensions for Copilot for M365? I'm gonna say the word Copilot a lot during this session. So know that when I say Copilot, I mean Copilot for Microsoft 365 specifically. But I won't say the whole thing because then we'll be here even tomorrow. We're gonna go through why would you like to extend that? Why is that important? And why is it cool? And then we're going to talk about how can you do it? What are the different methods of bringing in your own external data into Copilot? Then we're going to go through a couple of things that you need to keep in mind when you undertake this task. And we're going to wrap it up with a couple of things that you probably shouldn't do, even though you could, because we all know that every time with technology, there are lots of things that you can do, but with those lots of things comes also a lot of things that you shouldn't do, even if you could. So we're going to go through those as well. So to get started, I don't have a lot of material, or I don't have a lot of slides, but I have to talk. So let's get started. If we start with why would you even want to extend Copilot in the first place? Well, I know that a lot of people here by now have tried out Copilot. If you haven't, well, you probably know someone who has tried out Copilot, since it has been actually really generally available for a couple months now. Well, the number one thing is that we are not perfect. I'm sure everyone understands that even though how much Microsoft likes to think that someone would live in a world where all the technologies that they use are in the Microsoft ecosystem and no one uses any technology that's not inside there, we all know that's not the case. Everyone has some sort of technologies, some sort of systems and platforms that they use that aren't fully integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem. But now with Copilot, we run into a situation where we would actually like to take that data and bring it into the Microsoft ecosystem to get Copilot to actually know that content as well. Because that's my second point. Why would we want to do extensions? Well, it's because Copilot can kind of suck. Not in the case that, okay, it's just bad, you can't do anything with it, but rather than when you're thinking about this AI assistant that's connected to your enterprise data, it cannot help you if it's not connected to that enterprise data. And if that data is in another platform, we're going to need an extension there to help Copilot to get connected to your actual data that actually matters to you, because that's what actually brings that ROI into play. Because you're not going to get the return on investment from Copilot that you would like to have if it cannot do the things that you expect that it should be able to do. If you have all of your data stored in an external document management system and cannot connect that with Copilot, well, you're just not going to benefit from Copilot as much as you probably could. That's what actually brings the ROI, because it actually gets tied into your business processes that work with many systems in tandem. And as a nerd myself, why I like it, well, it's because it's cool. in general, making these extensions is cool. Having data flow from one system to another is cool. And the coolest thing is that it's natural language. If you're an UI guy or have been thinking about user interfaces or user experience design, well, natural language is kind of the best user interface you can have when you think about normal people who just have to use IT to get their jobs done. So with these extensions, we can take external systems that don't really have a natural language interface and use Copilot to do that. So we can make other systems more accessible. That's pretty cool from an accessibility standpoint as well. So then you could probably ask, okay, what do these extensions actually even do? What are they in the first place? So a couple technical things to get us up to date and on board with how these actually work. These extensions are currently only available in Copilot Chat. This means what was previously called M365 Chat, and before that it was Business Chat. So basically that chatbot, kind of like ChatGPT, but just with your M365 data. That's where these Copilot extensions are available. So you go to copilot.microsoft.com, and then you switch to the work mode if you have a Copilot license. Well, then you can access the chat and enable all of these extensions there. They're also rolling out right now the Copilot that helps you in Teams meetings, so you can start using them there. But right now, we're in the situation where, for example, you cannot create an extension for Copilot in PowerPoint or Copilot in Word, but they're rather just for this chat interface. Like I said, these extensions can then be enabled by the user. So before you send your message, you'll go into the plugins menu and toggle on the plugins that you want Copilot to use. Because this is an enterprise thing, of course, this can be fully managed, blocked, or distributed by admins. So admins can choose what plugins people can use or people can't use. And there's a whole big ecosystem of these plugins building up right now with first-party plugins from Microsoft. Then we have third-party plugins from various ISVs. Like here in the image example, we have Jira with a plugin for Copilot. Or then, of course, great for us nerds, you can build your own plugins as well. And we're going to look also into that and how it works. But in general, with these Copilot plugins, one thing that has really become clear with Microsoft is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And Microsoft really hasn't reinvented the wheel here with these Copilot plugins, because you dive into the technology and you'll find a lot of old rehashed tech that has now been spun up to run these Copilot extensions in the background. And it's not a bad thing, because there's, with these old technologies, or not really old, but just a bit older, you have a lot of documentation, you have a lot of history, you have a lot of open source material that can help you. So let's dive into the technology, how you can actually extend Copilot. What are your options? Well, there are four main options for extending. I would say nowadays just three main ways of extending Copilot on your own. We have Teams message extensions, which are, once again, not new technology in any way, just rehashed to now also work with Copilot. Very interesting way of how they work. Then there's graph connectors, even older technology. Think Microsoft Search. Think I bet someone has tried to fix SharePoint Search sometime in the past. So graph connectors could be familiar to you from there. And the Power Platform connectors really work in tandem with Copilot Studio nowadays. And it's what you mostly hear about when we talk about Copilot extendability. Everything's about Copilot Studio now. But it's very important to remember that it's not the main it's not the only way of extending Copilot. Yeah, it's the number one thing that Microsoft is pushing, but we all know from history that it doesn't mean that it's the only option. And then we kind of have bubbling under right now our OpenAI plugins. So think all of those already available plugins that you can use with ChatGPT. So if you want to, for example, book a flight or book a hotel or do math with Wolfram, those are also coming to Microsoft Copilot just a little bit later, but it's kind of in the works right now. I'll talk about that a bit later as well. So let's go through each one of these, go through what they can actually do, what's in the background, and what can you use them for, because it's important to know that each of these technologies has their own features and their own drawbacks. So it's very important that you choose the right method for extending Copilot. If we start with Teams message extensions, think Teams applications. Think maybe those really small Teams apps that you have been running already. If you go to Teams and start writing a message and click on the plus button, you might get these applications like YouTube or Poly is a very known one. But those are Teams message extensions. And now all of those extensions are also Copilot plugins. So overnight, a bunch of applications from ISVs and custom applications for bespoke use by just one company, they became Copilot plugins. And on the right, you can see what is the basic idea behind all of these. So what is actually supported right now are search-based extensions, meaning that you have an extension where you can, in Teams, type in a search term, it searches some kind of external system and brings you back the result, and you can easily share that result in Teams with an adaptive card. But now with Copilot, you don't have to do that search by yourself. You can just ask Copilot, well, like in this example, it asks, okay, how many cans of carrot soup do we have left? And then Copilot chooses the right extension, goes in, makes the search, and brings back a result with written out text and then adaptive card. And that adaptive card could have buttons like, okay, subtract 1 from stock, and then it will go and update the system in the background. So the main feature of these message extensions is that real-time data fetching. So these work really well with any structured database in the background. So think I've created extensions using Cosmos DB. There's some that use table-based storage. But basically any kind of structured data, this works really well in because it's basically just search that it's doing in the background. And it's doing it with bot-based interaction. So in the background, there's actually Azure Bot Service, meaning that there's a bot that takes in input from Copilot and then does something and returns something to Copilot. In the technical background, this is Teams Toolkit that you use. It's the SDK you use to develop these. It can be either C# or TypeScript in the background. I've been mostly in TypeScript. It's pretty easy. And example use cases for these message extensions are systems where data has to be real time. So day-old or a week-old information is already out of date. So the main use case we've been seeing is ticketing systems like Zendesk or Jira. Those are systems that are already fully supported. For example, like I showed you guys with Jira, you can just basically ask, okay, what is the status of this and this ticket? We'll recap, okay, this ticket is assigned to you and it's with this status. Or you could ask, okay, recap me all of the tickets that are assigned to me in this project, and it will create you a nice recap. Or also basically any system that can be searched in general. I have an example here, or I had an example at some point in the presentation, so I'll go to that at some point. But basically, the main thing is that this is search in the background. But if you have any system that needs to get searched by a user, well, this is your choice. And developing these in general is pretty easy. It's not a whole lot of code. You can make it really complicated if you want, but you don't have to. So, and there's not a whole lot of information how to specifically make these, but there's one GitHub repo that's been published by Microsoft that has very good example on how to create these message extension based plugins for Copilot. I'll get the banner here on screen at some point to give you the link. It's very useful. There's not a whole lot of documentation, but you can go and reverse engineer that code pretty easily. There's the banner. Thank you, guys. So I recommend checking that out. It really can help you get started with these extensions. And I think it uses Azure table-based storage in the background. So very nice use case. So moving forward, got to pick up the pace a little bit. Graph connectors. This is the most old school technology you'll basically find here. So the main difference to those message extensions is that where the message extensions were real-time, basically API pulls. So basically you just fetch data from an API. These are not real-time. This is basically think graph connectors as pushing data into the brain of Copilot. So Microsoft Graph and the semantic index. This basically is for mostly static data. Think maybe ServiceNow knowledge base or Confluence. So documentation, things that don't change really often, or very unstructured data like CRM or maybe document management. So think law companies with iManage or other third-party document management systems. What it basically does in the background, there's a virtual machine that takes a connection to all of that data, maybe once a day or once every 2 days, takes a dump of that and pushes it to Microsoft Graph. That's basically it. Here you can see a nice example on the right in the picture where Copilot references something that it finds from a graph connector from ServiceNow. So basically, you can just bring in information from there, and it will show to the user just like it was maybe in their SharePoint. One thing about this is also that you don't have to enable it as a user. It's just in the background. It's in the brain of the Copilot, so to say. So this is very good if you have data that doesn't just change that often. If you need to get real-time updates during the day, this isn't the option for you. And developing these, there are first-party plugins or connectors from Microsoft for a variety of things, like, yes, even Azure Data Lake Gen 2. That's actually possible if you want to do that. I wouldn't suggest you doing that. Then there's third-party plugins or connectors for services like mFiles, iManage, like I said, and a bunch of others. You even have third parties who just create these connectors and you can buy them from them. Or then you could build your own. But trust me, if I said that building a message extension is easy, these graph connectors aren't that simple because you have to have a virtual machine and you have to do some code and then all of that kind of stuff. Just very difficult, or a little bit more difficult compared to just a basic message extension, which is just JavaScript. And third, and probably the most hyped, is Copilot Studio. And we don't know for sure yet if this will be the main method for extendability, but it seems like Microsoft is really pushing it as that. So this is more in the low code and not so much pro code, but I wouldn't call this a citizen developer experience yet in any sort of way. You still need to have some sort of developer experience to actually make this work. The number one thing with Copilot Studio is that it's still very much a work in progress. So right now, we don't have all of the functionality yet that Microsoft is really raving about in their marketing. It's not just available yet. You'll see documentation that says, okay, go into this admin portal here and here, and the portal just doesn't exist yet. So it's still a work in progress, but it's really, really promising. Basically, the idea here is that you have a lot of different ways with low code to bring data to Copilot. The main thing here, I would say, is Power Automate. Basically, you could have a bunch of connectors in Power Automate. Then you just create a Power Automate flow that says, or basically could be even be an Azure function in the future, or Azure Logic apps, I would say, where you could just say that, okay, when a user asks Copilot this, go into this external system, fetch all of this data, and then come back. So, for example, if a user asks, okay, how much budget do they have left for this quarter, then choose or then recognize that they're asking about budget, then go to SAP and for their account and their department, search the remaining budget and then return back that value from SAP. That's basically what it is. But you can, of course, create custom connectors to all kinds of systems that you have. Copilot Studio already has a bunch of ready-made connectors, so you can basically just plug and play with almost any system if they're in the cloud. If it's on-prem, you'll have to do a bit more work. Then there's AI Builder, which is something that's still a bit bubbling under, not ready yet, but seems to be super cool. So basically, you can package prompts in a package and just say, for example, if you say to Copilot that, okay, I want to brainstorm about this subject. I have this innovation project, for example. Then AI Builder can take that, run that input through a 800-line prompt, and then give you the result, and you'll not see that massive prompt in the background. So basically, you can package prompts that your employees can use. And then last but not least, there will be OpenAI plugins. They will come through Copilot Studio. But once again, we are not really sure how they will work or if business users will, in general, really want them in the end. Just for the reason that, well, they're consumer plugins. So why would Copilot for Microsoft 365 really benefit from those in the end? So what use cases are here? Well, they're pretty much limitless, like it usually is with low code or Power Automate. You could have connectors to ERP systems, to CRM systems, to HR systems, to marketing systems, to whatever you want. Or one of the main things I've already seen, data flow inside of Microsoft Cloud in general, moving data from Azure through M365 to Power Platform. You can read Dataverse tables. So if you have something in Dynamics or you have a Power App that users are using, you can finally access that data through Copilot. Basically, having all of this data between the three Microsoft clouds finally to start talking to each other in Copilot. That's what Copilot Studio is great for. So how do you decide what to use? And here on the right is my actual example of a Copilot message extension that I created a long time ago in the older demo versions or preview versions of Copilot. This is very basic, but basically, like I said, it's a message extension, so it does search, and I can give it a statute from the Finnish law index that's online, and it will just go search for it and give me the statute from year 2021 and with the ID of 2, and it's something about taxes. And you can have an adaptive card, and here I have a button for you to just open up the website and read the whole statute for yourself. So that's a very basic example, but what do you need to keep in mind when you start creating these? The number one thing is to know your data source. Okay, what are you trying to connect to? Does it have to be real time? Do we just make a connector? What can we actually pull there? And what do we need to put into the API to get those results. So keep that in mind. Also, know your users, know what they actually want. You cannot just lock yourself in as the IT team, create a plugin, and then go to your business users and say, okay, use this, if you haven't even asked them how do they want to use it. You need to understand how they actually will use that plugin, or because then you will just waste your time creating a plugin that they didn't want in the first place. And know your resources. For example, a Copilot Studio plugin can be created very easily, but if you run into some limitations that you cannot overcome, you'll have to create, for example, a message extension. And with that, resources can really balloon up. You might need a lot more time and resources to create that plugin. And remember, manage your expectations and manage the business users' expectations as well. This is just a plugin. It will not fix everything. So if you just run into a situation where you say, okay, we can't do this right now, you will just have to sometimes accept defeat. And like we have in some cases with some very convoluted document management systems, just said that, okay, we can't do this yet. We'll have to wait for this or this or this thing. And with Copilot and the extensibility, like I said, with Copilot Studio, we don't know everything yet. Everything is advancing at such a rapid speed. It's very important to not waste your time on reinventing something altogether that Microsoft is going to do better in just a couple of weeks when it comes out as an out-of-the-box solution. So always check out the roadmap, check where Microsoft is going, just so you don't waste all of your time trying to create something that will be obsolete in 2 weeks anyway. And here we have a pretty basic decide chart. So if you're using Power Platform, great, just use a Power Platform connector in Copilot Studio. If you're using, if your data is something that you want to be indexed, just use a graph connector. Or if you want real-time data, then go for a message extension. That's great. That's basically what you need to do for your deciding right now. So last but not least, I really want to talk about what not to do. And with these extensions, because it's pro code, it's just JavaScript and the bot framework, or just message extensions and graph connectors in the background. You can basically do anything that you actually want. Once again, it's the question of should you actually do something. One thing that I would really like to say is that Copilot cannot fix everything, cannot fix all of your issues. I've always said that people are really expecting Copilot to do everything and the kitchen sink as well. But it's kind of the same thing as asking your email program to do your taxes. That's not what it's made for. And so Copilot cannot do everything. It's not an autopilot. It cannot take a lot of action on your behalf for external systems. So you can't expect just a Copilot plugin to, for example, do some very convoluted approval process and submit data into 10 different systems and basically manage your ERP for you. That's not what this is for. But in a broader case, Copilot doesn't really like hybrid environments in general. You should stick to embracing the cloud as much as you can. And I have one very important example for this. Because as soon as you look into graph connectors, you'll find out that the #1 use for graph connectors is to have online SharePoint and Microsoft 365 index data in file shares, so network drives. So many users will ask you, hey, can we just implement this so Copilot can then use the files on our network drives? Well, if you look at the picture on the right, I did that. Please don't do it. Please do not do it. It's a very bad idea. This is your chance to embrace the cloud. Why not just migrate to SharePoint or any other online data platform? You could do that much better, because here if you don't have the most pristine hybrid environment ever, you're going to run into issues like access rights. How do you map those on-prem access rights to a fully cloud system that only uses Entra ID? It's going to be horrifying. And you're going to be spending a lot of time mapping those access rights by hand for something that would have been around the same kind of process to just migrate to SharePoint and start using cloud-based resources in the first place. So just keep in mind, do not use graph connectors to start using on-prem file shares with Copilot. You should just migrate. It would be a much better idea. Because this is your chance to finally go fully cloud native. And all of these Copilot extensions are pretty easy to implement, but the moment that you bring in a lot of on-prem stuff, it starts to get a lot more difficult. So just save yourself some time and try to go fully cloud native from the beginning. So that was my last slide. That's what you need to keep in mind with when you start to implement Copilot and then implement Copilot extensions. One thing I would really like to say, always remember, is that when you implement Copilot, the first thing isn't extensions. These aren't the first thing. This is what you as IT can look at in the background. But for the end users, they should always focus on getting as much as they can out of vanilla Copilot just in general, from the out of the box features, and then look at what they can do with extensions on top of that. So this isn't the number one thing, because if this would be the number one thing, you would just code a tool based on Azure OpenAI on your own. So that's my talk. On the left, you can find my LinkedIn, and I recommend connecting with me. I'll try to share something nice from time to time. And on the right, you'll find my blog where I talk about, well, Copilot and modern work in general. And I'm going to be releasing a blog post going in depth into Copilot extensions very soon. So stick around for that. So that's been it. And if we have any questions, I'd love to field them. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your talk. Really interesting. I see Misha clapping. So there aren't any questions in the chat yet, anyway. But I do have one.
Okay.
So when you connect to these external data sources, right?
Yeah.
You get data in kind of unstructured ways. It can be all types of data. It can be all kinds of data. How do you make sure that Copilot understands what you're doing?
Yeah, so basically with message extensions, because there's the bot framework in the background, what it actually does is it takes in your prompt that you give it, and then it does a basic intention mapping. And you have these kind of functions in your bot that, for example, if I ask for, okay, how many units of this do we have in storage? It will map that, okay, he's asking about unit amounts, and they will map it to that function, go into this API and search for then it will just pull from the prompt, okay, he's asking for carrot soup, and do that search and come back with an answer. And then it knows, okay, because it's coming from this API, we need to do this with it. So it's basically just a bot in the background doing intention mapping.
Okay, and how do you make sure that your data is secure, right? Because that's so. When I talk with other companies about Copilot, one of the main concerns that I hear is always about data safety, right? They want
Yes.
make sure that the data they own, that's within their boundaries, that is secure and it's not being used to train the model or to make the chatbot smarter. So how do we make sure that interaction is safe?
Yeah, that's a very important question. And with these message extensions, it's very easy because all of the resources will be deployed into your Azure. So you can put in them just the VNet that you want, have it be networked to just the database that you want, and manage it like any other Azure resource. So that makes it pretty easy. These graph connectors, they're deployed just inside your tenant. So all of the data will remain inside your tenant. And it's actually something that Copilot does in the background, where it's doing encryption of, for example, if a plugin goes in and reads a file that you give it through Copilot, it will actually encrypt all other parts of the file, but just the part the plugin is reading. So the plugin won't be able to read the whole file. It will only read the part that it needs. So they have thought this out, but the main thing with data security is that it's almost always happening inside your tenant.
Right. Misha, do you have any questions?
No questions from my side. It's I'm very much on the infrastructure and Kubernetes front myself, and it was great to learn about this. And thank you very much, Mishka.
Thank you.
There's also no more questions in the chat, so I think that we can call it a night. Thank you so much that you were willing to take the time out of your evening to be here and to give this
Of course.
interesting presentation. Like we said in the introduction, if you want to keep up to date, click on the bell icon on the channel, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to the meetup group. We'd love to see you for the next edition, which we're already planning. Unfortunately, the date is not set yet, so I can't announce it yet, but keep an eye on it. And we have Lanzo in the chat now saying thank you very much. Thank you for watching, Lanzo, and see you all next time.
See you all.